So I'm back with a hard-hitting music video. Not where I'm playing music, done that, but I'm back to talk about music. No more politics, at least not for now. No commentary on celebrities or other YouTubers or anything salacious. This is a totally salacious free video. A video free of salation, if that's even the proper conjugation. I was I can't remember if I told somebody I was going to do it. You know what I just remember right now is I'm going to do that Tom Waits video that that one subscriber of mine commented on the video. I am going to do that because well, I'm going to do as long as this channel goes on besides just promoting my music, I'm going to continue to talk about things in my collection because I have just a very like wide esoteric eclectic collection. But the Tom Waits video, if you think about it, it's going to be kind of in that Nick Cave um, fall sort of vibe. Although with Tom Waits I can actually talk more. I have more to really say about him because I've really been his fan for a long time. And unlike with the fall where there's a lot of ambiguity. I was actually in the car listening. I went to see Jacob Gibbons' band, Temple of the Dads, play a benefit yesterday, and I was listening to the Unutterable. I think that's what it's called, because I got the new 4 disc set of it. I was listening to it in the car. My CD player actually worked enough for me to listen to it, and I was just like, man, this is so good. I really love this. But it's very hard for me to figure out exactly what's going on about it that I like so much, which is actually kind of the case with this. So this video is about the Elephant Six Collective, and I I didn't know I didn't know about it because you figure this it was probably in the late '90s when I first kind of heard about the bands that were part of it, and I was like, I don't think anybody at that time was really talking about them as a collective. The band that I came across, the band that was being played at the record store, and I got the CD used, although I ended up, I think, picking it up later again. Maybe did I have it used? I don't know if I had it, but it was one of those things that you'd be listening to, and at the record store, there were things that you were exposed to and they kind of broadened your horizons. But like I think I said in other videos, because other people that I worked at the store that were really kind of like hipster elitists, that kind of irritated me, that like I was sort of withdrawn and didn't want to like totally sign off with like loving the things they loved. I don't know if they really loved this, but this was an album that they talked about. It's the Olivia Tremor Controls like foliage or whatever. I think it's called Blood Foliage. I can't read this. Volume 1. This is the record I was exposed to. It was on CD. And this has this thing where there's sound collage elements and then occasionally it morphs into a very 60s pop formalist kind of thing. And yeah, it is kind of a 60s pop formalism. It's a very like psychedelic sort of sounding with like psychedelic, like the singing and everything. It's really recreating that vibe, but then it goes into these collages and sound collages and much very avant-garde sort of stuff. So I might have had this back then, but I ended up picking it up again later because just because I once you get away from those people uh, and you start listening to things on your own, you can really kind of choose and be like, oh yeah, I really like this, and really like sign off on it, and then you find also like people in the world aren't really that like hip to it, anyways. I think I got this in the early aughts, probably around the time it came out. The Olivia Tremor Control presents Singles and Beyond. This has some of the stuff on this, but it also has some of the other songs that they released. and it's a little bit more of a streamlined introduction to this band's material. I think that artistically, the Olivia Tremor Control is kind of the heart of what the Elephant Six project is, and I don't really know a lot about. I don't know anything about the Elephant Six people outside of just the music, guys. I can't tell you any biographical information, but I think that this band, with like the experimentation, the ambiguity, and then the occasional just like pop gold that would creep in there, and it was pop in that indie rock sense. I think that what they were doing is really central to the appreciation of the Elephant Six. It was my introduction to that collective, which I only found out was a collective later, and that's why I'm starting the video with these. Olivia Tremor Control split up into two groups. One of them, it was a band called Sunshine something, and I had it, but I felt it wasn't that. I felt that it was a little too generically pop or something, and I I think I ended up selling it at one point. The other strand that it went in, I guess there was two guys in the band. One went off and did this, whatever, the Sunshine, I think it was called, something Sunshine related. The other was the circulatory system. The circulatory system is, I think, the project that kept alive the experimental nature of the Olivia Tremor Control circulatory system. And I think that this album was a little bit more praised at the time, because I think both those records came out around the same time. And so I ended up having this and keeping this, and I do like this. And the guy that I know that appears on this is the guy from Neutral Milk Hotel, and I'll get to that in a minute. But he appears on a few songs on here as well. So if people like Neutral Milk Hotel, right? Yeah, and they don't know about this, and they might like this record. The other band that's really essential to that scene was Apples in Stereo. Apples in Stereo, I don't know if they had any member overlap with Olivia Tremor Control, but I remember them being played in the record store. The albums that were around back then were these two. This one all the way through is just a really great record. And this is like straight up like indie pop. You can put this up there with stuff by the Pernice Brothers, Josh Rouse, Superchunk, Guided by Voices, whatever. It's neck and neck with that. It was really it's just a really well constructed, great album with really great songs and very catchy. This one I didn't listen to a ton. It's got that, but it's got a little bit more of the experimental stuff. And this was the album that I think they did near the end. And this one, you can see that they're trying to get more. They're trying to get more straight ahead pop. They are trying to appeal to, or they're trying to get songs placed and stuff, because this is the early aughts where it was a chance that bands that were indie bands could get songs in TV shows and commercials and movies and things like that and make a little money. And contrary to what Bill Hicks had believed about 8 years prior when he was decrying such behavior, I mean, this is getting your music placed in like a Kmart commercial or Target commercial or whatever. It's very beneficial to a band, especially when you're not getting any radio airplay, and touring is becoming consistently more grueling and more expensive, and you're making money off your merch, and sales of albums are going down because of digital sales, which wasn't in full force then. But Apples in Stereo made this very consciously commercial album, and it suffers from the same thing that Sunshine Fix or whatever that other album was by the other guy from the Olivia Tremor Control, in that it occasionally veers into the too poppy. Things can get too contrived, too poppy and contrived, and then it becomes it can sort of be damaging to the song where you're consciously making moves or decisions within the song to veer towards the hooks and stuff. And there's a few songs I think on this that do that, but for the most part, it's still good enough to keep in your indie rock Elephant Six sort of collection. Other band I mentioned, actually, you know what? I mentioned this. This is a band that was in that collective, and it was the Essex Green, and I had their CD because I liked this other album. That one was a little too straight up revivalist, 60s kind of pop, but this was sort of, I think, the SX Green's attempt at doing kind of like a band sort of record, and they covered a band song on here, and I talked about this in another video, The Sixth Great Lake. This thing all the way through is really great. It's possibly one of the best things that ever came out of Elephant Six Collective. I put it up there with that Tone Soul Evolution. Yeah, Tone Soul Evolution by Apples and Stereo. The Sixth Great Lake came out of there. It's really great too. A band that didn't get a lot of attention out of there, but kind of kept plugging away, and they have the 60s thing, but there's also a little bit of like a prog thing, but it's a very prog in that, yes, sort of mystical kind of fairies and woods and stuff like that. And it's in their title. And I had the CDs, and then I think I sold them, and then I bought them back, and I kept them because you could find them used, and it was Elf Power. This record is good. Winter is Coming. I like this record. And the song itself, Winter is Coming, is really good too. And I remember KCRW giving this record, Creatures, some love back when it came out. And you figure it in the 90s, it was, I mean, there was this thing called the Paisley Underground. I'm not super familiar with it, but they were doing the Paisley Underground was a thing where it was like a 60s revival kind of thing, but it probably had a little bit more of a modern sort of spin on it. I think that with the Elephant Six Collective, I think that the when you had the bands that were doing the legitimate sort of psychedelic music kind of thing, they weren't making like modern concessions. They were sort of leaning into very distinct avenues of that sort of sound of that decade, and they follow them in different directions. This would be like a Dylan band country kind of thing. This is kind of more of a psychedelic prog sort of whimsical folk thing. The Apples and Stereo would be more, probably the most modern one, doing sort of like a Beatle-esque pop kind of thing with some sort of soul things going on too, because there's some really well written kind of, like that one song Silver Chain on here. It's got a very soulful quality to it. And then I wanted to say two things. So the most notable band figure, whatever, that came out of Elephant Six would be Of Montreal. I have about 4 or 5 Of Montreal CDs. I like Of Montreal a lot. I haven't listened to like the last 3 or 4 albums probably, because Kevin Barnes probably just spent their creative capital at some point, and and whatever. But I'd say from Sunlandic Twins to what's that album? False Priest. That run, Sunlandic Twins, Hissing Fauna, the one afterwards, it's almost all one song all the way through, and then False Priest, Skeletal Lamping, just really great. And Of Montreal deserves its own video, so I'm not putting Of Montreal in here. I'm just mentioning them as part of they came out of this thing and then in their own way transcended it, both artistically and financially or economically, of Montreal became a big thing that eclipsed Elephant Six. And then, oh yeah, and then another really big thing that was a little bit more of a sleeper hit, a cult thing, was the Neutral Milk Hotel, which I've never listened to. And I have a thing about that where it was one of those things where it was like so sort of like popular, and so many people were so sort of like devoutly into it. Not people that I really knew in person, but I would read about such a cult like sort of devotion to this album. Something about that gets me very like wary of it. That like Kool-Aid sort of like vibe. The Neutral Milk Hotel, I think it's called The Aeroplane Flies High or something. Never listened to it. Weezer's Pinkerton, I never listened to, because it had that culty sort of thing. Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville. Those three albums come to mind as being like really like they attracted this. They're like a big album for that artist or band, and people have this like radical devotion to it. I have a radical devotion to like big albums like Exile on Main Street, Tonight's the Night by Neil Young, Stooges, Funhouse, things like that. Those are a little more conventional. And then other obscure albums, I'm sure, that I don't come to mind right now that are huge for me. But like the Chamber Strings, I'm totally devoted to the Chamber Strings. But there's something that those three albums that I listed, and the way that those things have really attracted people's devotion, that really like, I'm just wary of it. And you get to a certain point where you're like, I've never like listened to this album, and I'm going to like keep it that way just because you have a certain streak, you know, like if there's a movie that's like, everybody's seen this movie and you're like, yeah, I've never seen it. Like The Lion King. Not that that's, but I've never seen The Lion King. And the longer you go without having seen it or something, you think of something else that sort of applies. The more you're like, resolve, like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. It's not time to do that. It's not time for me to sit down and listen to Neutral Milk Hotels, like The Aeroplane Over the Sea. I don't know if that time will ever come. And then the last thing I want to do is give a shout out to my friend Juan from Sofa City Sweetheart, because, and this is the reason I'm bringing him up here. This is his record he gave me last time I saw him play live. He was playing his birthday show. The reason I wanted to bring up Juan and Sofa City Sweetheart is because his influences, really, if you listen to him, it's like really the Beach Boys and Elliott Smith and like probably the Beatles and stuff. But there's a lot of his stuff, not just on this album, but on other things, where he's very, in the way he sings, it really sounds like it could have been like the Apples in stereo or something. So as just a little bit of a shout out to Juan, and to tell people that if you like Elephant Six, you should check out Sofa City Sweetheart, because it really taps in to that sort of pop style, and he doesn't get experimental or crazy, but the way he sings and this tunefulness and the songcraft, those things all are very reminiscent of like the best aspects of the Elephant Six scene, like especially Apples in stereo to me. So I just wanted to recommend that at the end. And so, if you like this video, like it, comment. If you want to like say something about, Neutral Milk Hotel, who I neglect, of Montreal, who I actually revere to a certain extent, and I'm going to do a separate video one later, or the name of that band that was the other offshoot of Olivia Tremor Control that I can't remember right now. So that's it. And listen to Happy Casualties too. And I'll talk to you later.